out and take a look and do what they need to do. Okay, so small purchases, this is where you're buying something that you're not doing a requisition and you need to actually go through the system. And this is also the procurement where you will not be required to do a rec, to go through the requisition, you won't be required to do a rec if you choose not to do it. Again, there's pros on both sides. You can do it, you cannot do it, whichever way. I'm going to go through the process as intended, and as I understand, I think you all pretty much abide by the $100,000 small purchase threshold, so this would be procurements $1,000 and below, or whatever your small purchase threshold limit is. And, I just note there that the thresholds are subject to change annually. And it will consist of a public solicitation of the procurement, but it's actually not required if your particular rules do not require you to do that, but it does allow you to be able to do a public solicitation. So basically what we have here is a list of the process steps, and you'll have this PowerPoint to look at, but you start generally with creating an open market requisition and notifying vendors. So you complete the tabs just like we did before, and here's the steps in terms of how to set it up and what to select. When you have your responses, and we'll go through that, you'll tabulate those and recommend your award. If you have approval paths, once you create your award, it will route through your approval paths. If you don't, then you'll be able to just go ahead and submit that off. And the final step, if you choose to send the purchase order, is to send the purchase order and create a change order in the future if you want to create a change order and attach an executed contract. So that's the basic steps. It's going to look a lot like what we just did. And I have detailed in here some basic instructions as you're going through the various tabs, what to think about, the options that you have, what to use, how to add vendors. That's going to be something new for us here. And, completing all your tabs and getting yourself to award. So that's outlined in the presentation. Let's go right out into the train environment. Let's hit our home button. So when in doubt, go home. When you're starting something new, go home. And since we're doing something that's new, let's go up to our documents. Let's go up to our requisition and click new. Okay. So short description. There were no donuts for me to release off of, so I'm going to put in that I want to buy some donuts. Can't do a release because no one's ever bought them, and so I'm going to put in that short description. If I had additional information, there are certain hints or tips that we can give you about the short description. Some like the purchaser to put their own initials in first. That way, if you ever want to go into the system and search for something you did, you can just put your initials in under the short description, and it's going to pull up everything you did. So, others like if you want to have a department acronym. So let's say it's your administrative department. You might put a department. Anything that you want to put in that short description, because that's a searchable field, you can put it in there. So you put in your short description, you come and pick your department, you pick your location. If you have a required by date, you can put that in there. This time, though, instead on our requisition type of doing release, we're going to do open market, because we're going to go out to the open market and see what they have. And my contact information pre-populated. This print format's not important. There's nothing there. If you have an agency reference number that you want to put in, you can put that in there. If this is an emergency donut procurement, you could select the kind of special procurement it might be. If there's no special considerations for this procurement, you just leave it blank. If this information really doesn't apply, if you think that your begin and end date, you know what those are going to be, you can say, I want it to begin right now, and I want it to be done by the end of the month, or whatever you expect it to be done. And over here on type code, this is a commodity, so you can select commodity. and click Save and Continue. Okay. Now we're going to come over to our Items tab, and instead of searching for an item, because I already tried to do that and I couldn't find any items, I need to add this. I need to add an open market item, something that hasn't been bought before, and I'm going to add it. So I select Add an Open Market Item, and it's going to take me out to this screen, and I'm going to further detail this procurement. So I have donuts, I want them assorted, and I want them by the dozen. So I put in any description that I want for my item that I'm buying, and let's say I want to get 10 dozen donuts. And my unit cost is going to be $10 per dozen. My unit of measure, I'm going to pick and change that, and I'm going to make that dozen. So if I was buying one donut, I could use each, and there is a reference out in our reference documents that explain what some of these are, carton, the various abbreviations, but I'm picking dozen. There's no special discount I'm expecting, so I'm expecting this to cost a total of $100. The system is going to calculate that out for me. What I do have to tell the system, though, is what is the NIGP class information. So I can search in a variety of ways. I can, if I know what it is, I can just put it in. But let's see what comes up if I search donut. Right there, it's telling me that the NIGP code for donuts is 375-45. So I simply pick that, I click Save and Exit, and donuts are a silly example, but this will be helpful to you, especially in the future, if you use some of the reporting functionality and you're like, I want to see all the office supplies that we've bought. And so you can go in, you put the code right in, and you can run a report based on the NIGP data. So it's also helpful to us to see, what's being procured. So that's really all the information that you have to add. If you know in particular that you really want Krispy Kreme, if there's some reason why you want to specify a manufacturer, you could go down here and do that. Generally speaking, we're not going to use manufacturer, brand, or model, but there could be some reasons why you might want to add that. So I can come down here now that I've completed this screen and added all of this, and I can save and add more items, or I can save and exit. And this is all I want to buy for my small purchase. So I'm going to save and exit and take a look at it, make sure everything's correct. If for some reason I have the completely wrong thing, I could just click here and delete by clicking the delete and then saving. But I'm really happy. I think I've got it, and I'm going to go ahead and save and continue. But I can add more items if I wanted to, and I could keep adding. So now I've got that correct. Now I'm going to come over to my vendors, and let's look back and look at my items real quick. And I don't know what we're going to have in the system. And if I wanted to look back at my detail and say, before I add those vendors, it was 375-45. It's my NIGP code. Okay, I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to add vendors that I want to send this solicitation to. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look up and add my vendors. And the way I want to look up and add vendors is I want to search by NIGP code. See if there's any vendors. So it's 375. And I'm not going to be so specific. I'm going to send it to everyone who's registered for 375. I don't have to drill all the way down. If I wanted to, I could. And I could come in here and pick up. I just want vendors that are registered under donuts. But I really want to get all the bakery vendors. So, because there might be some that didn't register under that code. So I want to get as many of them as I can possibly find. So let's see what my luck is if we have any vendors registered under that code. And we do. Look, all these vendors are registered in BidBuy. When a vendor goes in and registers in BidBuy, they put in some basic information about themselves, their PIN or their TIN, or their address, their contact information, where they want to be billed, and then they identify, and they self-identify this, which codes they want to be registered under. So all these vendors registered for donuts. I've got a big, long list of vendors, and I'm going to click Save and Exit. Before I do that, I have to select them. I'm going to select them all, and then I'm going to go ahead and Save it and Exit. And all those vendors now are going to be attached to this procurement. So if I want to do publish the informal bid on web, and this publish informal bid on web is not what I think the typical person would believe this to mean. So publish informal bid on web, all that means is that for the vendor accounts in BidBuy, when they log in, these particular vendors, they're going to see this solicitation. It doesn't mean that this small purchase is publishing out on like the main page of BidBuy. It simply means publish informal bid on web will publish in those vendors' control centers when they log into BidBuy. And they'll also get an email. So I'm going to say publish informal bid on web, so all these vendors get notified. I don't want to show them my unit prices. If I wanted to, I could, but I don't need to tell them what I think I'm going to pay. I'm not going to show that to them. Do I want to allow the vendor to change the quantity? No, I do not. Do I want the vendor, instead of giving me a dozen donuts, to sell them to me in only 10 quantity units or 5, per box? No, I really want to get a dozen donuts in my box. If I didn't care, though, I could check the box that says allow the vendor to change the unit of measure. And so in most cases, the only thing you're going to be selecting is this publish informal bid on the web. And then the other step is to select your bidder participation. And there are 2 options there. So if you're doing an informal quote, small purchase, and you're only soliciting a select group of vendors, and maybe you solicit, do any of you use the small business set-aside process or any of that? Okay, I've got I don't think so.
No.
Okay.
No, from us.
Okay. That's what I thought. So if you're not worried about that, but, if you just want to solicit from this group of vendors, you know that this is a sufficient level of competition, you're going to get good results, it fits the rules of your office, and you can just select, this is an unrestricted, you can select this as a restricted. Restricted informal bid, only the selected vendors can view and respond. The other option that you have is, maybe there's some better donut vendors out there, so I'm going to do unrestricted informal bid. This is going to post out publicly. All vendors can view and respond. But for our purposes, generally speaking, with a small purchase, we're usually soliciting, in many cases, directly to these vendors. What would you normally do? Would you solicit just from your limited group, or do you think you'd be more prone to doing a public solicitation for something that's a small?
I would say you typically go to restricted.
Okay, so we've got restricted. And that's, very common and probably the most common way of doing it. Now, the other thing that you're going to be asked to do down here is establish a bid ending date. And I want these donuts right away, so I want to get my quotes back no later than December 20th or whatever your required minimum posting might be, whatever you determine that is. And I want this available today. Purge date is not anything that we deal with, so you don't have to put anything in there. You go ahead, you click Save and Continue. And it's giving us just some yellow hints up here. You don't have a recommended vendor. Well, yeah, that's because we haven't gotten there yet. And there's no vendor and no recommended vendor at the header level. Yeah, so that all makes sense to me. It's just hints from the system. I read them, and I say, yeah, that's correct, because we have not gotten there yet. I am going to do one, maybe not. going to do that. Same thing. So everything's the same. I look at my ship to and my bill to addresses. I make sure that that's all correct. I come down to my accounting. I'm going to pick this not applicable. And actually, in the actual system, there's a much longer list of options. In most cases, I think you're all going to follow under most everything you do, with maybe a limited exception. It's going to be not applicable. Nothing special about this. I'm going to save that based on percentages. I'm going to rebuild it. Routing is going to be empty. I might have some attachments. I may have some spec documents. I may have some instructions to the vendors. I may have some documents that we use internally. Any kind of document that you want to attach here. If you want to add your form because you're doing a procurement justification for your donuts, anything you want to do here, you go ahead and do as attachments. Same thing with notes, same thing with reminders. Come down to your summary tab, and you're going to come down here, and you're going to look, and this is actually going to show you the list of vendors that you're sending it to, so you can look through here really quickly and say, yep, that's all correct, those are the vendors I wanted. This is a quick way for you to see if you need to go back and add anyone else, and if you did need to make any change at this point, you could. You go back, you could add other vendors, and you're going to go ahead and submit for approval. This is going to work exactly the same way. You can manually add, or you can do automatic, or if there are pre-established paths, it'll route through. I'm going to go ahead and click Save and Continue. Right now we're in the in-progress status, telling me that my changes are saved successfully, and it's moved over to the ready for purchasing status. Now, there are two ways that you can actually now go through the final stages to award this particular contract out to the vendors. One of which is, if your vendors respond electronically, what you're going to see is, when you come out here to your vendors, under informal quote, you'll start to see this change from create, and it will change, and it'll say something like received, that they are, or responded. I don't remember exactly which word it changes to, but once one of these vendors who's registered in the system goes in and submits a quote, that'll change and let you know, oh good, I've got a quote here. And because this is informal, and because it's a small, you have the ability to come in and take a look at this. If this was an IFB and it was a sealed bid, this would be sealed, locked down, and you wouldn't be able to do anything in here until the bid opening date. But we're not doing that. We're just doing a small purchase. It's very informal. And let's say one of your vendors, instead of going in and submitting a quote for you, to you, sent you an email and said, you know, my price is $8. You can, the state can, come in and put that quote in the system. We've indicated that the way we use the system is we are not requiring our vendors to use the electronic portion. At this time, vendors have the option to submit, or, you know, via whatever is acceptable to you, whether it's via paper, via email, however they're going to submit their quote information to you. So if they do submit it outside the system, you accept it and you submit the quote for them. So in this particular case, let's say I did get an email quote. I'm going to come in and I'm going to create, on behalf of the state, a quote for this particular vendor. Well, the process that we're going to go through here to create this quote on this small purchase is the same exact thing that a vendor is going to see. And on an informal quote, it's extremely easy. So I've got an informal quote, and I look up here, and I say, you know, here's the buyer, here's the ship to, here's the bill to, and I'm coming down, and because I selected the create next to the vendor name, the system knows I'm creating this quote for that particular vendor, and I'm going to put in that vendor sent me, you know, an email quote of $8 a dozen, and it's going to go ahead and calculate that out. Sometimes we get no bids. It's not really common, but if for some reason someone had responded with a no bid, you can indicate that here. Again, not a very common activity, but you could do that. And just to let the state know, yes, the vendor responded, they're active in the system, they just didn't want to bid on this particular thing. And once I input that, I'm going to click Save and Exit. And now you see under informal quote, it changes to View Edit. So that's what it changes to. So now you know that this particular vendor has responded. So this is a quote I put in on behalf of the system. If I wanted to edit it, and vendors can have this opportunity too, when they're doing an informal quote, vendors can come along and decide to make a change to their price. Maybe the price is dropped and they want to change it. They can come back in and a vendor can go, I changed my mind. I'm actually willing to sell that for $7.50. And the other feature that vendors have, if they wanted to attach something, they have the ability to come in here and add a file or add a form that they may have. So if we have any vendor forms, which I don't believe we have any forms in the system for vendors, but a vendor can come in and can attach a document of their own. Maybe they have some terms or something that they want to attach. They can go ahead and attach a document. And if you, let's say you received this as an email and you wanted to scan in that email into the system and attach it so that you had the email, that you received with the quote, you could go ahead and add that email as an attachment here, and you would then have everything all in one place for this particular quote. So that's the quote process. It really doesn't get much simpler than that. I save and exit, and now this should show me my $7.50 price. And like I said, anyone who responds electronically, you're going to see in there that they responded electronically. So now you are done with that, and you have gotten your quotes. Let me put one more quote in so we have more than one to look at. I'm going to put this one in at $10. And it's literally that fast for a vendor to do an informal quote. And I'm going to put this one in at $9. And now I come down here and I can do my informal quote tabulation. Once the timing is right, any posting requirements have been met, you received all your responses, and you're ready to do your award. So you just come down here to an informal quote tabulation, and the system's going to line your quotes right up for you. And you also can come out and, as part, if you're going to do your responsible review, and you want to look at each vendor, and you're going to evaluate all of them and verify their addresses, you have a link right up here to the vendor data. Oops, that link, I thought that link would take me in, but it's not taking me out. If that link doesn't take you out to look at the vendor, you're able to look within the system and look that vendor up and see all of their specific information. You also have the ability to look at all their attachments, if there were any required documents that they needed to attach with their quotes. And anything that you want like that, before you post out that informal quote solicitation, you would have included those instructions in the attachments that you had attached. And you review them, they're responsive, they're responsible, and what you'll see here is, and I think this is probably also one of the nice features of the system is going to give you a recommendation, but the system knows that you, as the procurement person, are going to make that final determination. So it gives you a double asterisk on the price and the vendor that they think is probably the lowest responsible, and you can decide that, in fact, yes, I agree with this, and I can apply this pricing. If, however, during your review, you had looked at Suzy Q and you realized that they weren't a valid vendor, there were some problems with them, or whatever the issue was, you have the ability to award to any of these. The system's just telling you who they think is the responsible. And I agree, so I'm gonna go ahead and apply this pricing. And because this is a major step in the system, it's going to ask you a question, okay, do you really wanna award to this vendor? Because once you do this, this is going to be a permanent step going forward. So once you get ready to award, you don't wanna do this until you're entirely sure that you want to do that. So you go ahead and say okay, and you come down here and say apply selected pricing to the rec items, and it says the vendor and rec item will be applied to each selected item. You say okay, and then you go ahead and close the window. So now you see up here your recommended vendor does exist. The system made that checkback for you. It's the vendor that you wanted to award to. I didn't show you an example with multiple line items. If we did have a small purchase, and let's say you had 10 line items on there, and you wanted to award to 3 different vendors. One vendor is getting the first 3 items, the next vendor is getting the next 2 items. You know, and since this is an informal quote, you have a lot of flexibility to do those kinds of things. You don't have any requirement to award to, all to one. Then you can go in and select a different vendor for each line item. And if you select a different vendor for each one of your line items, the system is going to generate multiple purchase orders for you, and the system will know that it awarded these to multiple. I just did a simple one, so you just have one. So now we're done with the vendor page. I'm going to come down here. I don't have anything else that I need to do. If I had any additional attachments that I wanted to attach, you know, before I go through the final stages of this, I could add additional attachments here. In my case, I don't right now. I'm going to come out to my summary tab. We're still in the ready for purchasing status. We know, you know, the short description is I look at everything, I make sure that I have everything correct. There's my whole list of vendors that originally got solicited, and I see my items, and I'm going to come down here. I don't need to take this out for a bid. This is the stuff that we use for doing a formal IFB. Now we're getting very formal and publishing and posting. So I'm skipping this bid stage altogether, but I can convert this to a purchase order, say okay, and it's going to ask me some questions about my purchase order. Before it converts this over to that purchase order, it gives me some options. Do I want a single purchase order with the header recommended vendor? And that is, in fact, what we have. A single purchase order using a selected reference vendor. We don't use that feature. A single PO using an item recommended vendor. We'd use that if we had the multiple line items and different vendors. We could use that. But no, we want a single purchase order using this header recommended vendor. It's a very simple purchase order, and we want to include the vendor informal quote attachment. So if the vendor had any attachments, we want to just include it over to the PO so we have access to it. And now I can convert that over to PO. So I'm going to convert it to PO. It tells me that it's in queue to be processed. I say okay. And now you'll see that this requisition has gone to purchase order. So basically we're done at the rec. That's the last stage for anything on a rec. And I'm going to come out to my purchase order, and I have an in-progress purchase order. This is going to be really simple and easy, and I bet this isn't going to, oh, this one works. So now it's working. So now this one says, okay, now you're a purchase order. You're going to have a few more things that you should tell us before this is done. What's the subject of the small business set aside? It's a question that's just going to be there. We'll say no to that. It wasn't subject to that, and your offices wouldn't be. What is our actual begin date for our contract going to be? And I can say, yeah, but it's today. What is my actual contract end date going to be? I say, yep, as I thought, it's going to be that date. If we know the date the contract's executed, we can put that in. We don't have to. Fiscal year of obligation. It doesn't autofill that. It wants us to tell them for sure we know which year we want it in. And I just continue looking for anything that I'm required to add, and I'm going to save and continue. Oh, it wants a type code. And the type code here will be small purchase. So we do have something that applies here. And enter a valid date. Where does it want? Oh, down here. Oh, what was our publication date? We'll say that was today. See if that's the last item it wants. Yep, that was it. So it takes me through, make sure I complete everything I was supposed to. I come down here and look at my items. Now let's say something changed between the time I did my solicitation. Again, we're in the informal small purchasing stage. You can make changes here. Again, subject to your own, rules and limitations and internal policies. But you could make some changes here. But like I said, if you decided at this point you really only need 8 dozen, you could change that to 8. I come out and look at my vendor, make sure nothing's changed there. I've got all the right addresses, my addresses. Come over here to accounting, and it's not giving me any red warnings, so it's carried everything over from before. If I had any attachments I wanted to add before I send this off, I could do that. Notes, we're not going to do a change order at this point. I could give myself a reminder if I wanted to, but I don't want to do any of that. I'm going to come down to my summary. I'm going to look one more time, make sure that I've got everything correct, and I am going to submit this for approval. I'm going to do an automatic approval. Right now, our PO is in the in-progress status. I'm going to do automatic approval. Now, the status on this purchase order changed to ready to send, which is not the last step in a purchase order. It just means all your approval, that whole approval process is done. This is where you're going to have the option again. Do I really want to send this email and notify the vendor and just do that? Or do I have an internal process I'd rather use instead? If you're going to use your internal process instead, set it to print status. But if you just want to use the system to go ahead and send your purchase order and you're comfortable with that, you just select Save and Continue. And now it's going to tell you, whichever option you chose, that this small purchase has been sent to the vendor. And that's really it. Small purchases, like the releases, are pretty straightforward. As all of you have listened to this and gone through this, is there anything that you've seen that you think would be problematic back at your office?
Not that I can think of.
Right. Yeah, the nice thing about the system, it does a lot of stuff for you, but it doesn't do too much. It still lets you be in charge. When do I submit it? When do I award it? Who do I award it to? You make all those determinations just like you do now. It's not trying to overthink, for us. So I think that's one of the things that we really like about the system. And just following the other, thing to think about right now is making sure that you don't lose it along the way and kind of go, oh yeah, well, I think I sent that. Always checking it and making sure you know what status is and that you're getting yourself to that final set status is important. Now that I have this one done, I can go back to home. Actually, let me look back here real quick. 2704. Okay, so let me go home. And it's not going to be here in my POs. You'll see that what you see from your home screen are your purchase orders are in progress, ready for approval, ready to send, anything that's returned or has a change order. There's no sent here. And where you find your sent purchase orders are here in receiving. So even though I told you we don't use any receiving functionality, that's the one thing we do with the receiving part of the system. You'll see right here, you'll see my locations pending, POs pending receipt. So if you wanted to see, and since we don't do receiving in here, everything just gets added to that list. You'll see that purchase order we just did here is in that. This is both the ones I've personally done, as well as any for the department and locations that I'm in that I have access to. So I can see everything that's gone out the door and then our purchase orders. If I wanted to find that purchase order, let's say I, came back a couple weeks later and hadn't got my donuts and I wanted to see what I had done, I can either look it up using our magnifying glass, click and find it, and it's going to pop up for me right away. If I have forgotten the number, which is more likely, I can come down here into my description. I can just search off of the word, and it's going to show me my donut purchase order. And now there's 2 in here, but in any event, there's 2. So that's
unknown color.
That's pretty much it. That is how to do a release and how to do a small purchase. When we come back tomorrow, we're going to get started right in IFB. I think we should be able to finish everything up tomorrow. We'll start out with any questions. Feel free, now that you have login and password information, to go back to your office and play around and do a couple of test releases for yourself and see if you have any questions that come up. And we'll start with that tomorrow, and then we'll go through everything, and I think we'll get all the way through how you're going to get your staff registered, and we should be all good.
Do we sign out of this?
Oh, yeah, really good point. Go ahead, Kim reminded me, when you leave BidBuy, always use your logout. That way you've closed out the system and no one can walk up to your desk and do anything and procure things for you.